I want to get back to some EM games, but I picked up this Whirlwind machine at a decent price, and it's a serious project. Had to put in a new MPU board and a new display, which still doesn't work quite right. The G segment's out, but I'll get into those later. I just want to get something so I could start working on the machine. Hopefully I'll be able to fix the MPU and the display and put it back in. If I start a game, some things work. The left flipper is really weak. I can put a ball on here. It doesn't even, it hardly touches it. Watch what happens when I hit the right flipper. That's the right flipper. See how the flashers are lighting? And then on the playfield, the 200K when lit flashers are lighting. That's not supposed to be happening. And of course, the right flipper doesn't work at all. And then the last thing is if I drop this in the cellar, it can't kick it out. The kicker is too weak. So I've got some kind of an issue with I think the voltage to these coils. Okay, I raised up the playfield. I just want to check voltage on coils here. So I'm going to ground the negative lead and just check these. This is the right flipper coil. It's reading 39.8 volts. It's supposed to be reading 50. Let's see if I can find, I'll look at a pop bumper. I don't think it'll show up in the camera. Let me adjust. Same thing, 39.9. Okay, here is the game. I've got it turned on and with the game running. And watch, this is the upper right flipper. On the inside of the cabinet, the right flipper has two switches on it. One for the lower flipper, one for the upper. If I push the upper flipper works. But if I push the flipper button, those flashers light. So I ohmed out the flipper coils. The left flipper coil reads about 4.8 ohms, something like that. And the upper right flipper, which is down here, ohm the same. When I checked the resistance on the right flipper coil, it was 1.9 ohms. So I think it's started to short out. The other thing I noticed is the capacitor, the spark suppression capacitor wire was broken. So I'm pretty sure we got a bad coil there. That's going to be somewhere to start. So we got a bad coil, a low 50 volts, and then some kind of weird where you hit the right flipper and it causes the flashers to work. So I'm going to dig into the schematics on that. Alright, here's the manual, and if you look at, there's a page in the manual for controlled, special, and switch solenoids. And remember those flashers I had? Well, they're over here, and they're all grouped together. The ramp top upper jets flashers, the ramp upper middle flasher, ramp bottom flasher, and the 3 drop target and middle drop target flashers. All of these light when the right flipper button is pressed. So I'm going to switch the pages over and show the auxiliary power driver board. And I'll get into this a little bit more detail later, but if you look, these 4 transistors are the switch solenoid driver transistors for those 4 flashers, and they're all tied together. So something is causing all 4 of these to trigger when the flipper button is pushed, even though the flipper button circuitry is completely separate from this. Could be because of the low voltage, could be something not right on this board, I'm not sure. I'm going to dig in a little deeper though. So the Williams System 11, especially the Whirlwind anyway, has a relay on it, an AC relay, and it's a multiplexing relay, they called it. What that does is lets the machine have more coils and flashers using basically a relay that'll switch back and forth between them. Now the advantage of that is you need less circuitry, but in this case I did a little research on the internet, and that relay should switch back and forth depending on what inputs are being received. What I'm seeing on the machine is it's locked onto C all the time. So as soon as the machine reboots, it's on all the time. And I did a little troubleshooting. I did a little poking around in the auxiliary power driver board, took it out and just ohmed everything to see if I could see anything. And I did notice that D12, the diode D12 is shorted out. And if you follow D12 back, it comes down this line, and it is the AC select. So it's powering this relay. So with that diode failed, there's nothing preventing the coil from being turned on all the time. So that's my, I think that I can easily replace that diode and see if it makes a difference and see if it lets the relay no longer stay on all the time. And then I need to try to figure out why the right flipper button is causing this line to pull down or pull up. I'll have to research the schematic to understand it better and see if I can figure out why that's happening. So here's the inside of the back box, and this is the auxiliary power driver board here, and here is that AC relay, and it will turn on, enable, be engaged all the time as soon as the machine resets. But what I want to do right now is check, here are the two rectifiers, and I'm seeing 39 volts for 50, and I'm seeing I think it was like 18 for 25. So both DC voltages coming out of this board are low. I suspect what's happening is the capacitors are going bad, maybe both of them. So when I pull this board out, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to replace these capacitors, and then I'm going to replace D12, which is the one that is shorted right now. But for right now, I want to check the incoming AC voltage. Okay, that's 30 volts AC incoming. And 56 volts AC incoming into the aux power board. So what should happen is those AC voltages should go into the two rectifiers, which will basically flip the negative side over and make a DC 50 and 25 volt. And then again, the capacitors are what keep that smoothed out. So I'm hoping it's capacitors. I'll replace those in diode D12. All right, so let's try to go over a little bit about the electronics involved here. So recall that with the AC input, it was reading 50 volts on the meter. Now, thing you have to understand is on AC voltage, it's a cycle, right? So there's a peak and a negative peak. And I was reading 50 volts with the meter, but 50 volts, to figure out how a meter is going to read AC, you have to take the peak times 0.707, and turns out this is 70 volt peak. And if you do the math of 70 times 0.707, you get 50 volts. So I got 50 volts input AC on the machine. The output from the rectifiers was about 39.9. So the way the rectifier works, take this same cycle, the rectifier is just basically a cluster of diodes that will redirect the AC to be like this. And it's going to have that same peak, 70 volts. Now, what's supposed to happen is the capacitor basically acts as a storage medium and gets rid of this empty part of the cycle. And that wasn't happening. So basically, the DC voltage looked like this instead of straight line. So when I replace the capacitor, I'm actually getting 70 volts DC on those coils. I freaked out a little bit at first because I thought something was wrong, but I checked on the user groups and they said, no, that's normal. So good news. All right, so here's an interesting problem on the pinball machine. If I light the northwest and northeast, and I initiate a ball lock. Okay. See how it does it? It just immediately kicks the ball out. Now that time it didn't do it. I got a ball kicked out, so here's my second ball. And I'm going to try to lock a second ball. Northeast, southeast. Okay. There's second ball. See how it kicked out 2 balls instead of holding those 2 balls and kicking out a third ball. It seems to happen very intermittently. Sometimes it's 1 ball, sometimes it's 2 balls. So I'll have to do a little work on it. Well, here's an interesting development. I've got the switch levels diagnostic test on right now, which anytime you make a switch, I'm going to move the camera here. Watch when I hit the right flipper. See how it shows the right flipper? Well, right now it's showing nothing. But I've got a ball in that left lock, and it's not activating. If I just move the ball a little bit, now it says left lock 1. So I think that's the problem that's causing the game to kick out balls randomly while I'm trying to load up enough to get multi-ball. So what will happen is if I lock a ball here, 1 ball or 2 balls, I can't ever get to multi-ball because it kicks the balls out. And I'm guessing it's because that thing sits down there and it doesn't make any contact. So I'm going to try adjusting that little wire piece to see if I can get a consistent switch activation and see if it fixes the multi-ball issue. Okay, so here are those 3 switches. I'm going to turn it here so you can see against the dark background. See how this one has this sharp angle? I'm going to try to bend that a little bit because what's happening is the ball is sitting right where my finger is and not activating the switch. So I think just by bending it back a little bit, it'll always make contact with the switch. Alright, let's see how that switch level test did. There's left lock 1, left lock 1, left lock 2, left lock 3, 2, 1. Looks like before this one would not work, it would be intermittent. And it will always show left lock 1 being triggered. Okay, we've got the Whirlwind here. Let's turn it on. One of the problems we have, adjust failure, which is an issue with the battery. Turns out, I'm going to see if I can move this to show. Put some light on it. So the problem I've got is this battery clip was bad. The battery holder was shot. The connections were bad. So I pulled it off, but I've got to replace this and put some kind of a battery, remote battery in so that I don't have corrosion on the board later on. Take care of that. Just take this whole motherboard out, and it's you just work around and take all the connections off, and then there are screws. I think there are 6, maybe 9 screws, and then that comes out and you can work on it on a bench. Notice I've got these labeled J10, J8. They're pretty straightforward. They're keyed. It's pretty hard to mess it up, but it doesn't hurt to label them. Okay, so there's the battery holder with wire, and you know, I kind of cheated. I had some speaker wire. It's 22 gauge. I think it's plenty for a battery backup. You just put the positive on the lower left and the negative on the upper right, and then I put a battery holder in there and screwed it to the cabinet so it won't bounce around, and we're ready to rock. Turned it on and set it to replay, shut it off, turned it back on, and it kept the settings, so it's ready to go. So I'm starting to experiment with some LEDs, and you can see that right now I've just got them on these 4 and these 4, and from the side where I've got the camera right now, doesn't look dramatically different, but I'm going to pick up the camera and move it straight at the machine, and I don't know if the camera will pick up on this, but you can see that they're much more intense, the LEDs are, and they're save energy, they're brighter, they look good. I'm going to try some frosted ones too and see if I like the frosted or the clear ones on this back box. You can see the experiment with the clear bulbs on the left, the frosted bulbs are on the right, and I've got some of the old bulbs still in there. So through right here is the frosted bulbs, not including the flashers. And then on the left, you can see where the clear bulbs are. They're spots on the back glass. So I'm going to use frosted, not clear. Clear I'll save for a playfield. So here's the back glass translate with the LEDs included. I'd say it looks pretty good. I ended up using from Pinball. They're a great place to buy lights, LEDs. These are one LED 6.3 volt 4447 socket frosted warm white bullets. I think there's a BA9S, might be a part number, I'm not sure, but anyway, they're a single LED frosted warm white, and I think I'm going to use these as my default on back glasses from now on because it really smooths out, and I like the way it looks. It looks real good. So this machine's a wrap. I've got to do a deep clean and new rubber on it, but it's functional. Everything works. The only thing I probably didn't cover well is when I replaced the capacitors and the diode. Remember when I was hitting that right flipper button, how the flashers would light up. I believe it was the diode, but I didn't chase out the circuitry in depth. But then my thinking was I could replace the known bad diode and then troubleshoot from there, and I think it ended up fixing it. So not 100% sure that was the cause there because I changed diodes and capacitors at the same time, but had I had to chase deeper I would have. So I'm going to turn the machine on. So I've got an error when I boot up. So I'm going to open the coin door and hit the advance button. Here's the test report. Right ramp down error. And I've noticed that on this machine it'll click occasionally, that right ramp. And did a little research on the internet. There's a switch. Apparently the ramp only has one switch. It doesn't do both up and down. And if that thing gets out of alignment, it can read wrong. So I'm guessing I just need to open the machine up and check that right ramp switch to see if it's making good contact or not. Apparently it's a fairly common problem on this machine. Depending on timing, I may not include that in this video. I'm not sure it's important enough to take the time to put it in here.